Welcome to Aligned with Kell, the podcast where we talk all things small business. It's a mix of mindset, empowerment, real conversations, and of course, alignment. I'm your host, Kell, a businesswoman with close to 20 years of business experience. Get ready for a mix of solo deep dives and inspiring interviews with awesome guests who will share how they have aligned their businesses with the lives they love. Let's dive in to align your business with the life you've always wanted. Welcome to another episode of Aligned with Kell. I am very excited today to have the beautiful Kirsten Morrison joining me. Kirsten is who I call my mentor when it comes to human design. I am a student of hers in the By Design program and course that she has written, which teaches me how to actually read human design. And I am absolutely loving it. But I just want to say massive welcome and a huge thank you for joining me today, Kirsten.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, I've wanted to do this for a long time. Kirsten was also a industry expert inside my membership, Bold Aligned Business, and Kirsten did an incredible presentation in March, which got absolute rave reviews from the members, and it's probably been one of the most watched recordings that we have inside the Resource Centre. But I wanted to come on with you, Kirsten, to kind of unpack your own business journey. I'm really interested to know kind of what your journey has been like, and definitely how you've created your beautiful business to be in alignment with obviously your human design, but also in alignment with what it is that you truly want from life. So let's start kind of at the beginning, if you would love to give us a bit of an overview about your business and how it all started.
Yeah. So basically, my business initially started based on my own personal development journey. And I think that's how many of us get into the industry, is that we experience something for ourselves and it sparks a passion in us to be able to help other people in that same way. And my initial introduction to personal development really came off the back of me taking what I thought was going to be my dream trip to America. And my intention at that time was actually to move and live in LA, because that had been my dream since I was 7 years old. And I always had thought to myself that, life wasn't really happening for me in Australia, and that once I got there, it would all unfold, and that would be the magic silver bullet, that all I needed was to be in LA and that my life would take off and everything would be solved and I'd feel so much happier and all the things. And I went on that trip and I actually had this incredible experience where I really got to, see the full dichotomy that LA has to offer. I saw the glitz and the highs of the highs, going to the premieres. My friends were in music and fashion, so I was going to all of these incredible events and, celebrity clubs, and in the booth with like Leonardo DiCaprio and all of these things that were that were happening, like the highest of the highs you can experience in LA. And then I also had a friend who was working on Skid Row, and LA has the highest homeless population in America, and it did at that time. And then I guess experiencing, really connecting with people who were experiencing homelessness and living on the streets, and hearing their stories about how they had actually ended up in that position, and realizing that I think there's so much perception around why people may end up homeless. And it was so interesting hearing their stories, and I'm like, this could really happen to any of us. This is just like one decision, one moment that has led them on another course. And so it was so interesting, I think, having the extremes in that. Yes. And in order to stay in LA and get my dream, I would have needed to do event management. So I would have been doing like celebrity events, party planning, which at one point was my dream. But I think when I really had these experiences of speaking to people on the streets, I had this yearning, like I just want to do more. I think there's more that I can do. I really am realizing that there's so many people who could use help, and I want to be a part of, a world where I am able to help and make an impact. But I think also the benefit of having the friends that I did who had all come from Australia and they had made their dream a reality in America. I was living around them every day and realizing just the level of confidence and the lengths that they had really gone to knock on any door and make those opportunities a reality for themselves and to put themselves in the room and really back themselves. And I realized, up until that point, I had been so desperate to like find my purpose and find my place. And I realized that even if I knew what I wanted to do, I didn't have the confidence in myself at that time to be able to hold it. And so I made this decision that even though, I technically, was at the brink of my dreams coming true that I thought I'd held for such a long time, I was like, I'm actually not the space to hold them. And so I came home and I had decided to commit that year to personal development. And as soon as I entered my first personal development workshop, I had this experience where, we had this somatic exercise where I had shifted this belief that I'd held in my body for so long that I wasn't good enough. And there was such a big crack in that story where I really recognized it as not my truth. And I thought, whatever has just happened in this space, I want to be a part of that and I want to do that for other people. And so that's really how I started my business journey. And I did the dance between full-time and starting my business for a really long time until I got to the point where that was no longer sustainable. And I made the brave decision to go full-time into my business right at the start of the pandemic. So basically my last day, because I'd already resigned and I had given plenty of notice, and my last day was February 1st, 2020. And so for me, I had then jumped into, I think even though you think you're prepared when you take that leap, it is a really big adjustment to be completely reliant on your own income. And at that point, I'd really been mainly doing breath work and in-person sessions. And so all of my projected income and all of the things that I thought I was going to be able to use as a resource to generate income were gone.
Yes.
And so at that point, I was watching all of my friends who were making adjustments in their business and doing the pandemic pivoting. And I was going to them and saying, what do I do? Like, how do I make this work? What should I do? What's working for you? And I was just asking, like, I will do whatever you tell me. I just want to make this work. And now I know all my friends at that stage were projectors and generators. And so I was following every single thing that they were telling me to do to the letter, and it wasn't working for me.
Yeah.
And I was getting really angry, not understanding at the time that was my manifestor, not self. And I was like this close to giving up. And I thought, maybe this just isn't for me. Like, maybe I'm not meant to be a business owner. Like, for whatever reason, I just can't seem to make this work. And at that time, human design had started infiltrating my field. I was seeing it everywhere. And so I thought, I'm just going to book a reading in and maybe there'll be some answers in there for me. And so when I finally did book that reading, I had so much affirmation in who I was as a person. I felt so seen. And it was like my entire life suddenly made sense. And I thought, okay, cool. Now I know the reason that none of this has worked for me is because it was literally not for my energy type. I was trying to be a projector. I was trying to be a generator. And as a result, I was actually creating a repelling effect with my audience. So I took what I had learned in that reading and started implementing it into my business and started, instead of asking and seeking permission, I flipped that to that informing energy that's the strategy of the manifestor. And instead of saying, what do you want to learn from me? Who do you want to have on the podcast? If I did this thing, would you want it? I was like, this is what we're doing. This is why it's going to be great. And this is how you can get on board. And it was just that energy shift. And then all of these results that I had literally been working years for in my business fell into place within a month or two. And I was like, okay, so this really works. And so I started experimenting with it for myself. And by the end of that year, I had made the decision to study it and add it into my business. And yeah, it's really just taken off from there.
I'm fascinated by it all, but there was one thing that you said way back at the beginning where you recognized that you were not in a situation where you had the capacity to hold what were your dreams and your goals. Where does one get for me, that's that's quite like, where do you get the clarity all of a sudden? Like, where do you feel that came from to be like, yeah, I'm in the right place. I'm in this world of opportunity. I'm on the precipice to be like taking the next step, but actually I'm just not the person I need to be to hold it. Where do you feel that clarity or that messaging came from?
Yeah. It was from seeing my friends and what they were doing every single day, the conversations they were having, the rooms they were putting themselves in, and just the way that they spoke about themselves and the confidence they had in this is what I'm here to do, and I will stop at nothing to make it happen. And I was watching them and I'm like, I don't have that. If I literally got an interview tomorrow, and I knew at that stage as well, because I was going to have to argue why I was more exceptional than an American person that lived there. I thought if I even get an opportunity and I get put in a room, I am not going to be able to say that about myself. And it was just this real awareness of, wow, okay, I've been going about this all wrong. I've thought once I find the purpose, I'll be ready, but I'm not even ready for my purpose. And so
Yes.
I realized that there was still so much hesitancy and doubt within myself, and I was not going to be able to do what I could see my friends doing every day. I didn't have that level of conviction with myself. And so I knew that I needed to go home and really throw everything I had into being the version of myself that I knew was deep down there somewhere, that I just hadn't given that chance to explore yet. And I think that, ironically, I don't think I really fully found that until I found human design. Even though I came
Yeah.
home in 2017, I didn't really find what I was really, really, really looking for until 2020.
Yeah. And you talk a lot about human design and being able to kind of really uncover who you are through human design as being a permission slip.
Mm-hmm.
And so is that because for you that is exactly how it felt once you had your own reading?
Yeah, because I just had this moment of clarity when she was explaining even just what a manifestor was to me. I realized that I had been fighting against myself my whole life. And it was
Mm.
just a relief to realize that the way that I had always really wanted to do things, or the things that I had inherently known about myself, just because I couldn't see them anywhere else, didn't mean that they were wrong. And I think that that
Yeah.
really gave me the permission to say, okay, cool, that may work for everybody else, but let me find my own way. And I know that every time I do a reading or introduce human design to people, they have that exact same reaction. And the word permission slip gets used in my world quite a lot. Just, I think, how my energies work anyway, but also with human design, I think it is a permission for people, because we spend so much of our energy in our lives trying to be something we're not, because we've been conditioned or told we should be doing it a different way. And I think it's just that relief of like, oh, wow, that is actually for me. That is how I'm built. That is how I can
Yes.
actually operate. That is okay for me to take a rest. Like, it just gives us, yeah, that permission to follow what is actually correct for us.
Yeah, and I think that like what I'm experiencing very early in my own journey of doing human design readings is that often they people operate in a way that is in alignment with their human design, but they're just not consciously aware that that is true and correct. And so you're right. Once that kind of gets exposed to them, and they're like, oh,
Mm,
oh, okay. Like, and it just, you almost see the confidence in themselves grow, that they're like, oh, no, I am doing the things that I'm meant to be doing in a way that I'm meant to be doing them.
yeah. I think it just gives us less room to resist that, because sometimes we can know that, but we can contort ourselves to do it a little bit differently, or be like, oh no, I should just be a little bit more committed, or I should just push through. Like, all of these stories that we have that really come from the mind. And I think the beautiful part about human design, because of the visual representation that we get, suddenly our mind has something tangible to hang on to. And it's like, oh, okay, great. Yeah, I can just listen to my body. Or, oh, yes, we are in the rest period. The chart said we can do that. So it's like, it gives the mind a tangible reason to listen to what we already know to be true.
Yes, that's very true. So you've obviously built a beautiful business and it's obviously evolved over time. What are some of the key things that you've learned through your business journey?
Oh my God, so many things. I think the biggest thing that I really implemented from understanding my design, that was a huge shift in my business, and also I think just business in general in the way that we see it was realizing as a manifestor, having the energy of surge and rest cycles, was intentionally carving out rest periods into my business, and also intentionally carving out weeks of creative time where
Yes.
instead of having my calendar open all the time, next week, for example, I've got the week where it's just my creative runway. And understanding myself as a manifestor, I know that I equally need pockets of downtime to even have the energy to create in those windows, but that I
Mhm.
actually need a much longer stretch, where maybe, you as a generator could, type a post after this call. Like, that's just not something that is as readily available to me. And so I actually need that spaciousness to have the energy and have the ability to be uninterrupted to create. And so now I really have these intentional blocks that are set up, whether I need the rest or am ready to create, but at least I know they're coming. And that was a big shift for me. I remember the first time I ever took a rest in my business, I was so terrified because I was like, I'm going to be bankrupt in a week, like it just felt like I shouldn't be allowed to do that. And it was so shocking because I realized, even as the second line profile, it's like when I go into those little hermit periods, I'm
Mhm.
still receiving call outs and invitations and opportunities, even when I'm resting, even when I'm not visible online. And so I was like, oh, all of this information I've been told about having to show up online every day and be visible and consistent, I'm like, that actually isn't true for me. And so that was probably the biggest shift that I had made. And then I think the
Mhm.
other thing is working in seasons. I think that there's so
Yes.
much impetus for us to work weekly and daily and monthly. And I realized as a manifestor, I actually really needed these like creative themes for a season. And I needed things to have a little bit more breathing room so that I didn't feel the pressure to have to push past the energy that I maybe didn't have. And so
Yes.
I think that was a really beautiful shift that I've made as well. And I think even just, I mean, you've seen the back end of my business as well. There's like so much set up, I think, to mitigate my need to respond and for people to feel really cared and valued, regardless of whether I'm in a rest period or not.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that up because I had the pleasure of doing a reading just before this interview for another 6-2 emotional
Yeah.
manifester. And we were actually talking about her launch strategy and making sure that she has things put in place for her that when she's in rest, that her community and her clients still feel very valued and looked after and cared for, but also to not be forward planning launching too far out in the future.
Mm,
Because if she said, I'm going to launch on this date and just happens to be in a rest period, that's going to be really challenging for her to be able to deliver.
mm.
She's like, actually, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah. And I think also it's really hard, I know for me, there's, let's make a 12-month plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. Like, I don't even know what I'm doing in 6 months' time, let alone like a year's time. And so I think that when I have tried to set myself up like that, there's probably been this, for me as an undefined heart, this desire to prove myself and stick to that and stick to my commitment, even though potentially the energy wasn't actually there for it. And what I've really learned with how my surges operate with the unique intricacies that I have within my design, I always think of it like, when you go to the deli and you get a ticket, it's like my creative urges have a ticketing system. And so they kind of start to backlog behind each other. And I know the priority that I need to pour my energy into those things to make sure that they're actually delivered to the standard that I have and within that real surge energy. And so, it has also given me a little bit more patience with myself as well, rather than trying to rush an idea before the urge is really there to deliver it. Because the confidence that I have in myself actually really varies in those times as well, in the sense of like, not the belief that I have within myself, but if I'm in an urge and I'm delivering an idea or I'm in launch mode, I literally feel like superhuman. And so there is that initiation behind that. I am fired up about it. I am passionate about it. I'm ready to jump on lives and podcasts and all the things. But if I'm in a rest period, I'm like, don't perceive me. Don't look at me. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to be on live. So it's just a different energy. And so I'm not going to be able to initiate people into my offerings, and I'm not going to be able to initiate people into a movement or to feel something or to be compelled to do anything if I'm all out of energy and all out of juice, and I'm like, oh, like getting on stories like, I can't do this.
Yes. And so do you feel like through you really honoring your design, and you spoke about it before, even the second line profile, when you go into that kind of hermit shell and you take that rest period, you're still getting invitations, you're still getting called out for your gifts. And so things don't really come to a screeching halt where you're like, that's it, my income stops because I'm
No.
in a rest period. But do you feel like because you are so in alignment with that and you are really honoring your design, that everything just continues to work for you
Yeah.
in your business and in your life?
Yeah, and I also think that I've now gotten to the point where I kind of, in some ways, like, at this point, being so many years into things, like people are aware of me. And so I think that when I do pull back and disappear, like my ride or die clients or audience, like they notice that. And I actually had the funniest message come through from one of them the other day. She sent me this like meme from a Manifestor account, and it was Moira Rose from Schitt's Creek, and she was like walking down the street like with this like incredible outfit on, but she was really strutting, and it was basically like when the urge kicks in, and and my client was like, this is how I see you when you come back from a hiatus. And it was like, so people know, if they've been in my audience for a while, this is what you can expect. Like, she's going to disappear for a while, and there's almost like a little bit of anticipation of like, when she comes back, what's going to happen? And so there is that energy. I think that people are curious when I do disappear a little bit. And so I think that there is kind of that point now where, I'm not brand new to business. So I think that, people are aware of what I do, and I am top of mind, for some people in different spaces. And so that's obviously really beautiful, and that helps as well. But I also think I have also set things up to be working for me when I can't work for it. And like an example of that would be my podcast. Like, I continually get people saying, I'm just binging your podcast now. And initially I was like, well, that's great. I haven't done an episode in like a year and a half. So it's like, there's things out there that are working for me that people are still finding me through, even when I'm not visibly there. And so I think that
Yeah.
these things that I create in the power of my surge are creating a ripple effect that loop people back into my world in different ways, whether I'm actually showing up, quote unquote, or not.
Yeah, I love that. And I talk a lot with my own clients and my members inside Borderline Business about showing up on, social media
Mm,
or to their community in a way that really aligns with who they are, who is very authentic to who they are, and to take their community and their followers on their journey.
mm.
And so when you got this incredible clarity about being a manifestor and, informing, is that something that you took them on a journey with those people that were already following you? Or did you kind of just internally shift your energy and that was it?
I think a bit of both.
Like,
There was a
yeah,
bit of education because obviously I started doing human design as an offering. So I started to explain to people what I had really discovered through human design, how it had impacted me, what I had learned about myself, the clarity that I had received. And I think that what that also then helped me to do was to start to inform my audience what they could expect from me. And so it was like, okay, cool, we're picking up speed. There's a new season coming, like, showing them the images from the photo shoot or whatever that might be. Like, this is what you can expect, buckle up. And so people would like be like, oh, okay, what's happening now? We're picking up speed, yay. And then when I was going into a rest period, I would say, okay, great. So comes the end of this season. Thanks for playing along. And you'll see me a little bit less. But in that time, this is still how you can work with me. And I think also
yeah,
there's this perception of like the manifestor rest period. Like, I'm just like, feeding myself grapes on the couch and watching Real Housewives for weeks on end. Like, that's not really like a rest period. Like, I'm still running a business. But what I then have to be is even more selective about my energy. Because if in a surge, I feel like I've got 180% energy, and then in my rest periods, I've got between 40 and 60, that 40 and 60 is going completely to my one-on-one clients. And so
Yes.
I don't have that extra energy to then go into social media or creating a podcast or launching something new. It's like, okay, this is the time when I pull back, and the people who are in my little hermit cave with me get my undivided attention and my energy, but I don't necessarily have the extra left over for some of those things like social media. And so it's just been really, I think, communicating that shift. And I think also, even with the podcast, it's like, okay, cool, here's season 1 all in one day. And so then people are like, oh my God, what? Can we do that? Okay, I'm going to binge it right now. And so it's just been shifting also in explaining, like, you're not going to ever expect a weekly podcast from me. I'm not going to have a weekly newsletter. And it's like, I've just been really clear and upfront about that. And I think one of my biggest things is, there is such, I think, a narrative in the success personal development world where it's like consistency equals trust. And I actually don't think that's true. I think that you can be consistent all the live long day, but if you're also, showing up in an energy that maybe is forced, I think people can feel that now. But also I think it's far
Yes.
more important to show up in integrity and to actually say what you're going to do. If you say you're going to get a weekly podcast, you're going to get a weekly newsletter, you're going to get 3 posts a week, and then a week later I'm not fulfilling that, that's where the break in trust comes. So it doesn't actually matter that I'm not consistent to industry standards. I'm consistent to the word that I've delivered. And so I think that people don't expect that from me. So there's no break in trust. I'm telling you what I'm going to do and I'm doing it. So it's like, that's what's
That's
trustworthy.
exactly, yes. That's exactly what came to mind for me. It was like, but you are being consistent because your messaging and the way that you show up is consistent, which is in alignment with your
Yeah.
design. And it's not in the known form of consistency as many people would know it, which is showing up day in, day out,
Yeah.
whether you like it or not. And so I love that. So share with me, what are some of your highest values in your business and in your life?
Yeah. It's interesting because I think they align so much with my human design. And, I think that I really, we've even gone through that exercise in By Design where we've looked at some of the key words that really jump out at us based on some of the definition in our design. And I think for me, definitely freedom, 100%, especially as a manifester. Also authenticity, creativity, and having the ability to really creatively express yourself, and also being really tapped into a sense of purpose. I think they're probably really the highest values that echo across my business and life, because I think there's quite a lot of crossover and they're all really interchangeable. But really to be freely expressed and to have the ability to create in a really unfiltered way, creativity, especially like, bringing office to life, bringing visuals to life, branding, like all of that stuff just really lights me up. And yeah, really having a sense of purpose that drives it all is really, really, really so important to me.
Yeah, I love that.
Mm.
If you could say that, is there something in your business journey, something that you have launched, something that you've released? Is there a favorite, or is there a biggest win, shall we say? Well, however you want to language it, what would that be in your journey thus far?
Well, I think there's a couple. It's like having your favorite kids. But I think my
Yeah.
all-time favorite, that I would say the biggest win, was actually a program that I now have on the self-paced store, which is called Alchemy. And that was the biggest win for me because it was the first program I felt like I really created as a manifester. And that was
Mhm.
my intention going into that launch, was I'm not going to have a plan. I'm just going to be as manifester as I can be and just see what happens. And it was still to date my biggest launch. And it just, like, that was the first time that they held it. And I think it was so important to me because I was like, wow, I actually just did this in the way that was completely authentic to me. And I think, especially now having, even deeper context to my energy and the details of my design, I recognize that it really just was like the perfect intersection of all of the things that I'm here to bring to the world. And I think that was really represented in that offer, which was really about, embodying your design when it comes to your business and your purpose. And it was just such an incredible experience. And I ran it 3 times, and each time was just as successful as the last. But I think one of the things that also was incredible about that was just the branding that I used, the song choice that I used. Like everything was just really, really, really activating and empowering. And I think it just really encapsulated like the energies of my incarnation cross, which is really the purpose that I'm here to bring. And what I loved the most about that was every single person that joined was like, I didn't even read the sales page. I just knew that I needed to be in. Like even some people just saw the visuals and they were like, I don't even care what this is. Like, this is so fucking cool. I just went into it. And so it was just this real proof of like when you're really in alignment with your design, like how much people resonate and feel that without needing the proof or the details. Like they can just feel how much that's going to be in alignment. And I think that was just such an incredible representation of my design. And I also think, off that, then I think By Design and Catalyst were then my two second faves from there. But I think, By Design is also an incredible testament to how much I love that program and how much it works, because it's been going for nearly 3 years now, which is like wild for a manifestor to have something ongoing like that for 3 years, especially with an undefined heart. So I feel like that would be my second favorite program. But I think that was also because that also was born from Alchemy. Like so many people in Alchemy were like, can you do a reader training? I was like, okay. So, Alchemy also created By Design in some ways.
Yeah, and By Design is just it is an incredible program. There's so much in there. Like, what are we? It's over 300 videos, isn't there?
I mean,
there's just so much. Yeah, because you've got all of your other masterclass and all the previous calls, and there's just so much incredible value in there. There's also one thing that you said about your core values, and that one of them was authenticity. And, when I talk about you to people and people ask me about human design, and then of course, when you're a industry expert inside Bold Aligned Business, there is a way that I always explain to people how I see you. And that is, you are never any different. You are always the same. Like the way that you are in a recorded video to the way that you were in a live masterclass to the way that you are right now in this podcast interview, you're always the same. And I think that, I'm assuming, is definitely part of your design as well.
Yeah.
But it's just that apart again is part of being consistent, because you're just always exactly who you are. And so is that part of
Oh,
design?
100%. And I think there's like literally no other choice for me to be that way. And I used to get in so much trouble for it in my corporate career, because I just was who I was and I would say what I wanted to say without a filter. It didn't matter whether it was a board meeting with the bar staff, with the CEO, like I was just the same everywhere. And obviously in those settings, you're supposed to be a little bit different in each room, and I just couldn't do it. So I just would always shock, and, people would be like, whoa, okay, well, just can't believe you just said that in that meeting, but okay. So I even knew like that was part of what I really was so excited to have my own business, because I'm like, I can't wait to just be me all the time and it be okay. So
Yes.
I think, there's obviously people who don't like that, but there's obviously people who really do. So I think it's always going to be, even with the manifestor energy, there is that, either, magnetizing or repelling thing that happens naturally for us anyway. And I think that was a really hard pill for me to swallow, because I probably always just wanted everyone to just love me. And I'm like, oh, I don't like that I can't do that. And like, it was like, I knew that the more I, stepped into the energies of my design, the more I was actually going to naturally repel some people, and that I wouldn't be for people. And that was, I think, a really challenging thing to reconcile with for myself. But it was also like realizing that the freedom in being able to be myself was far greater than trying to water myself down to please everybody, which actually ended up pleasing nobody, including myself.
And I think that is just an incredibly powerful lesson for all humans, right? Is to just understand that you are not going to please everyone, and not everyone will like you or gel with you or be your cup of tea or however you want to say it. And so that you may as well put all of your energy into just showing up as your authentic self,
Yeah,
and welcoming in those that are going to be along for the ride, and
totally.
yeah,
100%.
leaving the other ones
You know,
behind.
even
Yeah.
my incarnation cross, which is the energetics of my purpose, is the left angle cross of individualism. And it's like I'm here to empower people to be individually themselves. So if I wasn't embodying that journey, then obviously that's something that I couldn't do for other people.
Yes. Yeah. I am a big believer that we get to choose how we do
Mm,
business. And my big thing is that I'm not interested in my members or my one on one clients doing business the same as anyone else. Like it really has to be in alignment with core values, the highest priorities that you have in your life at any given season. And of course, now with this added element for me of human design, if you could give anyone any advice in regards to being in business, what is like one or two key things that they could explore within their human design that you feel like would really support them in their journey of kind of, being in alignment, being in flow, and not kind of fighting against perhaps conditioning
mm.
and external expectations?
Well, I think first and foremost, the most important area for us to understand is our energy type because it is our auric structure and how we're here to exchange energy with our potential clients and also our clients. So I think that is such a permission slip in itself to understand, okay, this is actually how I am here to exchange energy with the people who have stepped into my world and how I can provide the most value. I think the second probably biggest thing that we can really understand as business owners is also our authority because it's our decision making center. And I think in order for us to really trust ourselves in business, we've got to trust the decisions that we're making. So I think they're probably the two biggest components. And then probably closely followed, I would say, for me personally, I love knowing the energies of the incarnation cross because I think there's so much value in there to really understand the essence of what we really came here to contribute. And there's so many clues in there, I think, that really just give us this incredible North Star as business owners of what we're actually here to do. So I think the more that we can understand those, the better. And then I also think the open centers because there's so much in there where we can really recognize potentially where we're sabotaging ourselves or where our not self is taking the show and where we may be holding ourselves back or the areas that are what I say putting a kink in the hose to our design because we can have all of this incredible, you know, these incredibly detailed, beautiful gifts that are just continually flowing through our design. But our open centers sometimes are the things that create the kink in the hose and create the kink in the flow of energy. So the more that we can actually understand what these energy centers are and what our not selves are, then we can start to say, okay, cool, I'm actually noticing my not self here. What do I actually need to do to move through this? And a prime example of that is, someone who may have an undefined solar plexus in business where the not self is avoiding discomfort, avoiding emotional confrontation and truth. And so I've noticed that sometimes that can be an area where we are launching in our business. If we've got an undefined solar plexus there can be a little bit of that procrastination because launching can be emotionally uncomfortable. So it's like if we recognize that, we can actually then work with ourselves to move through some of those barriers and recognize that we're always going to have a relationship with these and how can we make it the healthiest that we can.
Yeah, I love that. And I am someone that has an undefined solar plexus and have had an interesting relationship with launching, shall we say.
Yeah.
So
And I
yeah,
think,
that's
some people as well, they might be listening to this like myself that has a defined solar plexus and be like, oh, I struggle with launching, but I have a defined solar plexus. And yeah, but I also have an undefined heart and a completely open ajna. And so my head's like, I don't know how to make sense of this. I don't know what the first step is. And my heart's like, oh my God, what if everyone rejects us? And so I think we all experience these common things, right? But when we understand our design, we can understand where they're coming from. For me, it's not that I'm concerned with experiencing emotional discomfort. I'm concerned with my ideas not making sense to people and being rejected. And so that's a whole different thing that I can work on rather than regulating my nervous system to feel that I can actually hold the emotional discomfort of being in a launch. So this is where I think we can then just really pinpoint and be very direct and finite with what actually we need to do specifically to support us to move through that resistance, which may be very different to the next person.
yes. Yes, I love that. Yeah, That makes so much sense. And I just think that there's just so much within human design. I mean, we could literally sit here and talk all day. But it's just, for me, it's been a massively eye-opening journey already. And I will never forget, I'm going to share this story because it's relevant and we're on my podcast. But when I had my human design reading with you, you talked to me about my sacral responding in sound and to be ensuring that I'm listening to what are the sounds that my sacral is making. And I, at the time, was still talking about doing a podcast, but I had created 6 or 7 examples of podcast tiles and I wasn't sure which one I was going to go with. And I asked my beautiful mastermind to show me what their favorite was. And it was one that I was like, oh, okay, right. Oh, well, that's the majority. That must be right. And then I took the same examples and showed my bold aligned business members and got them to choose their favorite. And they chose the same one as the mastermind. And again, I was like, oh, they've chosen that one as well. And it was like, on the reading with you, the penny dropped. It was like, that's my sacral going, it's not the one. It was like affirming to me that that's not the one because I kept saying, And then from there, you were like, narrow it down and just be like, go with, out of 2 choices, is it this one or is it this one? And then we arrived at what is now the podcast tile, which I guess when I look at it now, I think it was always my favorite, but I was like, for some reason, feeling like I needed to ask other people.
Yeah.
But
And I think
through that asking, it did confirm what it wasn't going to be.
And I think that's the thing, right? It's like, as a generator, just because you're, it is actually aligned for you to involve your audience. And in that, you actually got the clarity of like, oh, actually, I don't agree. I like this one. And so just because everyone else said yes to that one doesn't mean that as a generator, you've automatically got to go to the one that everyone else responded to. It's giving you feedback because you're going, I don't like that one.
Yes.
And so that still gave you clarity.
Yes, absolutely. And so it was just, I feel like in that moment for me, that was just like a really big eye-opener in that, yes, that makes so much sense. And that is why I couldn't move forward with the podcast tile, because here I was thinking I should be going with what everyone's choosing. However, that was exactly the response I needed because my body was like,
totally.
That's not.
And that's what we were talking about as well. Like, I said to you, how are you going to feel when you're trying to market that tile and you're seeing it everywhere? So it's like, if that's not even lighting your sacral up, of course there's resistance there to them wanting to actually execute the podcast because it's like,
Absolutely. And I just knew that I would be like, I would see that everywhere and I'd be like, And so, it seems so freaking obvious now, but at the time I was like, that was like a bolt of lightning from the sky. That's just like, oh my God, it's not it. Yeah. It's not the one.
Do you know what's so funny is that one of my purpose energetics, the representation of that in energy is lightning, and it's called like the thunderbolt. It's like the lightning strike of clarity that can come through with like the energy that I can provide. So there you go. That's exactly what you got.
I tell you what, that's exactly what I got. Yeah. That's exactly what I got. Well, I want to say a massive thank you for joining me on today's episode. As I said, I feel like we could talk for days and probably weeks in and around research. Yeah. But I want to thank you so much. I feel like it's been incredibly valuable with everything that you've shared. And as I said, your session inside the membership of Bold Aligned Business has just been so well received. Everyone's got so much from it. And I know people have gone off and they're starting to deep dive and learn more about them, which is, absolutely perfect. But thank you so much. I'm excited to see your business journey continue to evolve and see what magic you deliver. But thank you for your time and showing up with me on Aligned.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's so good because I've obviously seen you get ready with the podcast and talk about the podcast. And so it's so great to see it here in the world, and also to now also be on the podcast with you.
Yeah, I'm so grateful. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Aligned with Kell Quarrell. I hope our conversations have inspired you to be bold in the pursuit of your dreams. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd be so grateful if you shared it with the business women in your life and took the time to leave a review. Your feedback is like an ice-cold glass of Prosecco, always welcomed and always appreciated. You might even consider giving the show a follow. Until next time, continue to take bold action towards aligning your business with your deepest desires.